We are living in challenging times, a transformation where people awaken. And that is filled with many challenges. And today, with this podcast episode, I want to provide you with an insight, namely that you have been on the path of awakening for a very, very long time, and what lies ahead for you now, and how this transformation can be clearly and luminously shaped for you. Because it is super easy to achieve when we know what it's about and when we internally align ourselves with the relevant topics that are currently very important for us indeed, each one for themselves. Welcome to this live happy podcast episode. My name is Linda Giese. I have been a spiritual mentor for over 20 years and the author of Consciousness Next Level, a wonderful book I want to recommend to you during Ascension and Transformation. And I am also the founder of the Being Potential method. Discovering the Being Potentials was an absolute game changer for me. And I have introduced a method so that everyone can truly recognize and live their own being potentials. For your being potentials have been given to you for this life, specifically from yourself to your being. Because you're here in this incarnation as your being, as an individual in the year 2001, but ultimately you are indeed born from your higher self. And for this life of being here on this earth, you have indeed been given very special capabilities and strengths, possibilities and potentials, so that you can truly find your task, your calling, your path, and walk it with abundance, joy, success, and health. To know more about it, there's a link in the show notes. We regularly host free live shows there. Bring your biggest problem, join the show, free. I'll see what I can do for you. So, I am very happy to do that. So, let's take a look at this awakening and why it is so dark right now on our earth right now. And I believe that the dark night of the soul, is also a very important part of awakening. And I am also quite sure that you have already gone through some processes in this regard. A participant from our program inspired me for this podcast episode. He said to me, "Linda, I totally trust you and I really put my life in your hands, even though I believe that you don't really have experience with burnouts and the dark night of the soul." Naturally, I was quite astonished that he could think that about me. And he is very new to our program. And shortly after, I spoke with a young man I worked with a few years ago, and he told me, "Sada Linda, I almost didn't work with you." Why not? We discussed my topics, my goals. These goals were too small for you. We don't even need to start. That's not how I work with you. And then I thought, oh, Giese, 17 years of TV career, a big YouTube channel, a full house for her programs and offerings. She has it easy to talk. And these statements just made me come to understand how it might sometimes seem indeed to you and someone like me, in fact, and this also applies equally well to other people who constantly produce their content. It always seems like everything is so easy. That's not it at all. And I would like to take you on a journey to allow you to reflect on what has happened in your life that has brought you to this very point in time. Because awakening is not just what is happening now, but involves a deeper understanding. It is about understanding the events of the past, the choices you have made, and how all these elements have come together to shape your current reality. It is not something that started. It never begins at the moment when we realize my awakening is starting, or my dark night of the soul is beginning, or I am having spiritual experiences or spiritual insights. It's like the tip of the iceberg. The journey lies far below the water, like with an iceberg. It started long before. And if you recognize that for yourself, then you might also have a clear thread for yourself where you are headed and what might clearly be your theme. I have to admit, I came into the world as a spiritual being, just like many of you did. And I was such an oddball. And I generally didn't have it particularly easy due to my heightened perceptions. The relationship with my parents was very, very bad. They just didn't understand me, and there were huge, huge problems, which ultimately led to my dark night of the soul, and a very long dark night of the soul, really manifesting concretely when I was 8 years old. That could only happen because there was simply no real connection to my parents before, actually. Yes, no emotional connection, no feeling right, loved, supported, understood. At the age of 8, unfortunately, physical abuse began for me, and it happened once a week, and it lasted for over 4 years. And during those 4 years, I was truly, truly trapped in the dark night of the soul because I had no one to talk to. I had no way out. I didn't know how to go on. I really just wanted to die. I couldn't concentrate on school. I couldn't focus on all the things that are so important. I couldn't engage. I was trapped in a world where everything revolved around an overwhelming darkness to the point of possible immobility, with deeply rooted fears and anxieties that accompanied me 24/7, every single day and night, without any respite or relief. After these 4 years, my mother was fatally injured. So, it was a seamless transition. One must say that the abuse indeed stopped because my mother had an accident. Because of this circumstance, I no longer needed to go to the person where it always took place. Our family life has changed completely due to the death of my mother. And thus, this habit no longer made sense. I didn't need to go there anymore. That was, of course, a great blessing. But the death of my mother, indeed, even though we had an extremely difficult relationship, it still truly threw me into a deep and bottomless pit. I have completely and utterly lost all faith in the good, in life, in myself, completely. So, this whole situation added a dark and significant layer to everything with which I had to struggle for another 4 years. That indeed brings us to approximately a full 8 years. Burnout, high stress, intense fears, dark night of the soul. That means at the age of 12, I was ultimately initiated again in 2001 for my spiritual journey because I asked myself deep questions. What is life? What is death? What is the meaning of my life? How secure is life? All the questions one asks them. And I can tell you, in my experience, I once remembered that I personally used to go through life each and every day with a profound sense of my body. I could feel my veins 2001, the vein walls from the inside. They felt very inflamed, almost as if someone were indeed rubbing sandpaper there. That was how my body felt, and it was unbearable. As mentioned, this persisted for many, many years. And what came out of it, and I just want to emphasize this, I rarely talk about it. I don't even know if I've ever mentioned it here before, but I'm just going to do it today. I got out because I came into contact with drugs. And for me, it was suddenly like a switch, like pressing a button, where suddenly the world was beautiful. My worries were gone. My problems were gone. It was, of course, not an adequate means to truly be able to live, but it initially opened up a calm and also a view into another world, which suited me very well. Because as a spiritual person in the early 2000s, as someone who came into contact with the harsh reality of darkness very early on, it was naturally a field of experience that, I can clearly say today, has served my spiritual journey. Yes, because I was definitely able to have experiences that you simply can't have without such substances. In my early 20s, when I was 20, I really fought my way out of it alone and without any help. Why do I emphasize this? Because for me, it was naturally another very strong, empowering phase of life that was tough. Anyone who has ever dealt with dependencies and has let go of them, whether with help or without, knows what that can mean. And this strength, which was once again activated within me, and this strength, because even in the dark and lonely night of the soul, which constantly needs to activate your strong will to survive, my playful dog is playing here right now, because otherwise, you absolutely wouldn't be able to endure it, even if you just want to die. This withdrawal from substances was, of course, an incredibly intense and challenging phase for me, which also helped me to realize and understand that I myself, and this is so dominant, so crucial, and so important, that I myself am responsible for my life. I also write more extensively about this in great detail and depth in my book called Consciousness Next Level, because there was a very striking and significant moment when I realized that I had to take control of my life. And all of this happened at a young age. Then I continued on my path in a conventional and normal way. 2001, reflect on what was happening with you at that time. And I became a mother. Also, I believe that the birth of every woman, when she gives birth not by C-section, but really goes through labor pains and the pain, there are these moments where you think, wow, I can't do this anymore. The pain is so unfamiliar that you think something is wrong. And at least that was the case for me. And so, this can also be a very strong initiation for an awakening, for the meaning of life. And yet, that still wasn't the end of my journey. Because when I separated from the father of my daughter, or our daughter, I fell back into the dark night of the soul. Yes, for me, it never got bright again. I remember that in that year the sun was shining, and I had managed to get a small apartment for my daughter and me, where we had such a beautiful courtyard. It was really quite enchanting, and I had deliberately chosen it because I thought we could spend a beautiful, loving time there. The problem was simple. I couldn't stand the sun. I couldn't stand the light. I was unable to feel joy. Everything was just incredibly difficult. And I emerged strengthened from that as well. For example, I found myself in a very, very difficult economic situation there indeed. And one day, I was really sitting in ankle-deep water in the basement on the floor and had a nervous breakdown because my daughter had brought home lice, our first lice. And I had to wash the laundry. I emptied the closets, stripped the beds, and prepared myself for a night shift in the basement, washing clothes. The laundry was on the floor. I didn't have enough laundry baskets. Started washing machine first load. Machine breaks down, water leaks, basement flooded. And I sat there and knew I had no money for a washing machine and didn't know how I was going to get us through. And I didn't know what we were going to wear the next day. I was at my wit's end. And that was the moment when I came out of the dark night of the soul. Because there in that basement, perceiving myself as this miserable heap, once again in powerlessness, not knowing how to move forward, I told myself one thing: Linda, you will never, never feel this way again. Yes, I gathered my courage and started my own business. It was crazy. Of course, at first, I looked into how to do it and what I could do there. That was when the journey of self-empowerment began. So these are all steps that happen. And look at how it started for you, what journeys you have already been through. Because the path I have taken shows me, for sure, the very clear common thread. It's about trusting yourself, you 2001. You can't trust anyone else. That's how it started for me. Today I can also trust others. But primarily, it's about being able to take the reins of my life into my own hands. If there's something in my life that I don't like, I change it on my own responsibility. And part of awakening. Spiritually, people think it is all about light and love. Awakening is about liberation, 2001. With liberation from your own legitimations, from your beliefs, from the convictions of who you are and who you are not. Yes, and what you can and cannot do, and what you are allowed and not allowed to do, and much, much more, definitely. The entire worldview. Yes, if you remember when you were a small child, when you were in your perception, in your reality, and your parents came along and stopped you and told you how to understand the world and how to behave. And this whole process is called upbringing. but it means that you are being drawn deeper into this three-dimensional matrix and actually develop a feeling that, as you are, with your perceptions, etc., you're not good enough. We have all gone through this, more or less. Some people have indeed received a few tougher packages, and it is important to free yourself from these so that you can once again be that soul being, that being for which you started here. And yes, and in the end, I ultimately built quite a very strong career, which indeed few people actually know. I founded a company that simply has approximately several million in revenue and around. I emphasize annual revenue, not small. And it was so incredibly difficult for me to handle that I thought every day I was going to have a heart attack. I then really handed it over to loving hands because I just don't want to deal with it anymore. I don't want anything for it. I just don't want to continue with it anymore. And I also had a 17-year-long career as a TV host behind me, which was quite fulfilling and rewarding when I felt I was becoming emptier, grayer, sadder, and more depressed. I had already experienced herniated discs, which were quite painful and debilitating. Sorry. And yes, just also diffuse illnesses. And I just really felt like I was only a shadow of my former self completely. I was a fake because I helped other people find happiness and resolve their blockages. And in that, and this is amazing, I was really, really good. Yes, but that's also where the name Live Happily comes from, by the way. The viewers gave it to us, gave it to me back then, because there was a deep conviction among the people afterwards. This developed over the years, where it was simply proven that if you are in contact with Linda, if you work with Linda, then you will be happy, then your problems will be resolved. So I had the capability, even though I was becoming increasingly sorrowful inside, even though I actually knew something was indeed really wrong. I just couldn't get to it. Do you know that feeling when you sense there's something inside you that wants to come out? Or you know there's something in you that needs to be resolved, but you just can't reach it? That's how I felt too. And I was also quite sure I can't leave the job, nor what should I change? Yes, that was really easy. That was just terrible for me to actually understand what the real exit strategy is. So really, really getting out. This fact was reflected back to me one day by my daughter when I was lying depressed on the couch for 3 days after another TV shoot. And my daughter stood in front of me and said, looking down at me with sad eyes, "The image is so burned into my mind that I could throw myself on the ground and cry." She said to me, "Mom, are you really so unhappy?" I don't know if you can imagine that. You know, everything I ultimately did for her because I wanted her to know that I love her, that I am happy with her, that we have a happy life. That's why I could work so hard like crazy, because I just wanted to make it for us and create a beautiful life for us. And when she felt that she was the reason that I was really unhappy, it just plunged me into such a very deep healing crisis that was really extremely intense. I had already ended a narcissistic relationship some time before. That means we were already coming out of a very, very difficult time. And that was also, for example, the narcissistic relationship, the relationship with a narcissist, which was a nightmare for me. For 4 years, I stood in the shower, crying and praying to dear God. And I said, "Dear God, take this man out of my life." Knowing he was wrong for me, I knew. I just couldn't get out of this toxic situation. But even that was extremely important and valuable because it allowed me to realize something I otherwise wouldn't have, that I had lived a childhood where both parents were narcissists, one covert and the other overt. And I simply wouldn't have realized it if I hadn't been shown the mirror in that particular relationship to see what had really gone wrong in any way at all. So that means, ultimately, it was an incredibly significant stepping stone in the grand scheme of things for the awakening, and the ultimate awakening. Very significant indeed. Even though I can say with absolute certainty that I am not through it yet. I don't know if one will ever be absolutely and completely through. I want to emphasize that precisely at this very moment, but it was precisely this moment when the dearest person in the world, the person for whom I would give my life, for whom I would drop everything, believed that she was the reason I was unhappy. And this healing crisis that began showed me very clearly that this TV shoot is completely wrong for me. That in this system, into which I was pressed, it didn't matter if I did a good job, even if I was the ratings queen, even if I was the model power woman, it simply wasn't something that suited me. And in this healing crisis, I discovered the potentials of being. That means through this deep encounter with myself, I realized who I really am and what I truly need. And that all of this, apart from my daughter, does not fit me and my potential at all, in any way whatsoever. And this realization was so revolutionary. Indeed, it was a revelation for me. I quit the TV shoot job and didn't know what would happen next. That was our income. But I thought to myself, okay, screw it, no matter where it goes, I will never bend myself again. I will never let myself be squeezed in. I will never let anyone tell me what to do. I will no longer bend myself. I will no longer pretend. From today on, I will shape my life in a way that fits me and my potentials. And what was incredibly exciting in 2001 was that from the moment of realization of what my potential for being is, from the moment I decided never to live differently than what belongs to my potential for being, and some I really had to learn to live with because they were absolutely, completely trained out of me in my childhood. On the contrary, I had huge inhibitions about living out some of my potential. I felt constricted, anxious, and it was good. It was good that I still tried to live happily because through that, my deep-seated primal wounds became clear and evident to me. I understood why I have challenges in living out one potential or another. And through this, I recognized what my primal wounds are. And then, of course, I was ultimately capable of healing her. And from this journey, from this healing crisis, a method emerged. This is the Being Potential method, a unique and transformative approach in which I take you one-on-one, providing personalized guidance and support, and guide you exactly on the path that has so magnificently and profoundly enabled my exit from the D matrix into a state of true awakening and enlightenment. Yes, and to get out of all the fakeness, out of all the limitations, the beliefs, etc. Really. And for those who think I have a good book on beliefs, I can work with that. My shelf is so full. This has nothing to do with awakening, nothing to do with mental enlightenment. It has nothing to do with understanding. It's about experiencing. And this dark night of the soul, in which some may perhaps find themselves, or perhaps a night that is somewhat dimmed, just a bit gloomy, perhaps. Everyone goes through very deep guiding crises. Ultimately, these are great gifts that help us to recognize. And what is so incredibly, truly, deeply, and profoundly fascinating to me is realizing that some people choose the spiritual path as a kind of bypass. It was definitely the case for me as well that I had fled into spirituality because everything was good there. And I can still remember, back then on TV, I always preached light and love, by the way, with full conviction. And we had an employee who was very radical. She always talked about shadow work, and she really scolded our viewers quite a bit, indeed. And I always thought, my God, what is she doing? And I couldn't imagine anything about it at all. And I also thought a bit arrogantly that she was on the wrong path. Today, at that point, she was definitely further along than I was because shadow work, the work with ourselves, with our deep-seated pains, with our primal wounds, it's simply super important. We can't get around it. But it doesn't always have to be this dark night of the soul, Usend, because it comes so that we can definitely recognize, so that we can truly free ourselves, so that we can absolutely cleanse all the crap out of us that simply doesn't belong there. And there's so much bullshit in us that just doesn't belong there. And if you are one of those people who choose spirituality simply for light and love and unicorn fairy dust, then feel free to rest in it a bit if you need it right now, indeed. But fundamentally, it essentially goes in a completely different direction. Spirituality has a lot to do with personal experience, with shadow work, with deep self-reflection, and with turning the inner self outward, revealing the inner self to the world. And it can sometimes feel as if your whole body is experiencing inflammation in various ways, and someone is rubbing those spots in different areas until you realize what you need to let go of. So these pains or all these symptoms that so many people have, they are ultimately there to help us recognize what needs to be cleared up. Never about the symptoms, never about the pain, never about the illness, always about if you can see what needs to be cleared up. Your body is your best friend. It doesn't lie. Through your body, you experience physical symptoms, which are very important. It's not about drifting off into some spiritual realms. And these mystical experiences, they're exciting and magnificent. Enjoy them very much. But that's not the point. You awaken in your body, and interestingly, also through your body, because your body is being transformed as well. And in this earthly life, you simply cannot leave your body because you and it are one, and it is your strongest advisor. Therefore, if you have any issues, always ask yourself, what is this really about? One of the most important questions, what is this about? And when you have an answer, check if the answer concerns you. I often hear my employer, the circumstances, my partner, my bank balance. No. The question is, so the answer is always definitely me. I feel that. I think that. I believe that. I am convinced that. I am afraid that, whatever. And when you have this answer, then you ask yourself, okay, and what does that mean? 2001, perhaps? What is this really about? Anna, can you please dig a little bit more thoroughly, a bit deeper? Yes, and for me it was natural, and this is an invitation from my side. For me, the potentials of being were a revelation, and for hundreds of people as well. They enable you, because if you know who you are, and if you know what your potentials are, and if you indeed live them, then you don't need these crises. And for anyone who is like, wow, I am currently looking for maybe a new mentoring program, a great program for further education, for self-reflection, for working on myself. If you are already considering investing in yourself and doing something for yourself in a completely self-responsible and independent way, 2001, then I warmly invite you. Join our program. I will absolutely include the link to our completely free initial consultation in the show notes. You are welcome to attend our free live show. It might inspire you more. So you can decide how you want it in any way. But fundamentally, either way, there are many people currently offering support. Currently. Choose someone who suits you, someone you trust. Choose someone who is already where you want to be. I think that's always a pretty good barometer because we hear it very often today that people say, I've already done so many coachings, and why should you be different from the others? What should I say to that? You have to experience it to know it. I can only say because we have the design potential method, yes, she knows no other, she has no other. So here we are, breaking new ground. But, that's not what it's about. For you, in your opinion, a very clear barometer can be, in your view, who is already where you want to be. Who do you feel so attracted to that you think, wow, like that man or like that woman? That resonates with me. I would like to be like that too. This can definitely be a very clear and important indication for you of whom to move forward with. Because we are all not alone here. I definitely had my mentors, and every good coach has a coach. And look, Just look at the top athletes. Every top athlete has a coach. And I also have trainers because I simply want to learn. I want to continue to develop myself. And much comes from within myself, and I have my guides in 2021. But sometimes I also really enjoy finding a good coach or doing my morning fitness with my fitness trainer. Without it, I just wouldn't get my butt in gear. End of story, that's just how it is with coaching in general. So you can, of course, wait for life to teach you as you know and learn from it. And what you get from a coach or a mentor is indeed invaluable guidance and support, a shortcut in your journey. If you can afford to take the long road, maybe emotionally, economically, regarding your dreams, how much longer can you keep pushing it off? Then go your way purely, nothing against it at all, in any possible way. But if you are looking for a shortcut, then let someone help you who is already further along than you, in any possible manner. And you don't need to look for someone who is already, who knows, how enlightened. You just need someone who is further along than you. That is always a pretty good indicator, in fact. They are close enough to you to actually understand you and your issues well and can, indeed, in the best possible way, help you to get out of your, well, however disoriented journey, perhaps right in the middle of your awakening process. And that's what I wanted to make clear in this podcast episode. We are all in the process of awakening, even if you feel it has nothing to do with awakening. That's why I shared my journey with you, because believe me, at every single stage. So I thought God had indeed forgotten me. I didn't think I was on the path to awakening. I thought I was a jinx. I thought I must have done something really terrible in this life. I really dealt with that as a very little girl because I didn't know why I felt an endless sense of despair. For me, it was endless back then, and it felt like it would never end. Children also have a very slowed perception of time. The suffering just didn't stop, and it simply had no end. And the tremors of 2001 were regular impacts that were constantly and continuously lasting. And that is naturally, yes, that is indeed naturally really bitter. And yet, and I can say this very clearly today, it started very early for me, but I think for some of you as well, that was already the beginning. And today I know that spiritual leaders indeed often have an early childhood experience, already with the dark night of the soul in their lives. For example, among various indigenous peoples, there are unique practices and traditions. In some tribes, children who are chosen as spiritual leaders are raised in absolute darkness for several months, years, or even up to their 18th year, depending on the specific customs and beliefs of the tribe. They are only learning to use their spiritual senses in order to effectively and efficiently communicate with the universe. They are taught through the darkness with the help of the universe. Someone just brings in food and drinks. Otherwise, they live in absolute darkness for many, many, many years. And only then do they come out into the daylight and learn to use their physical senses to interact with the outside world. And all those who, in their childhood, here in our Western culture, have gone through the dark night of the soul, maybe it is because you have a mission, a special purpose, that you are chosen in this life to make a significant contribution for others, to bring about positive change, to inspire, and to lead by example. I have recognized my purpose throughout these various different stages and phases in my entire life. How about you? Write it in the comments. I'm very curious how you liked this podcast episode today. How was your trip? Take your time, because it not only does us good to know how it was for you, but it also does you good to just sit down and write it down. And feel free to put it in the comments. It definitely does us all good when we absolutely support each other, because we are legions of it. There have always been awakened people throughout history, always in various forms in different eras. And during this particular period of time, you will absolutely be someone who indeed belongs to the awakened and enlightened people. And that is the incredibly exciting thing about our time in this era we live in. In the past, it was just some chosen ones. And now we are indeed legions, truly awakening and truly unstoppable. And be aware, you are not alone. But be aware, stop complaining. I just say it like it is. It might trigger some people. I hope you understand what I mean. Stand up. Stand up. Your peace, SOS/EOS fighters. Intense word, right? Light warriors. You are lions and you are she-wolves. You are powerful in every battle and you are resilient in every circumstance. You are incredibly strong. Activate the power within you. And if you are currently even in a crisis, transform it into your strength. Yes, because it works. My daily bread. I do this every day with many people, and always and exclusively with success. That's possible. Yes, and if you can't do it alone, then get help. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I also had a mentor back then. The most exciting sentence he said to me, which moved me the most and supports me today, is, Linda, that people were hostile and critical towards me, wanting to put me down and keep me in my small world. He told me that they didn't want me to grow. Linda, only listen to the people who are already, definitely, absolutely, where you want to be. With love, the very best for you, dear friend, your sister in spirit, your Linda.